Hello again. Today I am going to introduce to you transitive and intransitive verbs. You should already know quite a lot about verbs. You should know the most important words in the English language because you cannot complete a full thought without at least one verb. You should know that. You should also have at least a couple of ways to divide the idea or the category of verbs into, let's say, groups. So we've already talked at length, most likely, about being able to divide verbs into action or being verbs. Some verbs tell you what a subject does. Other verbs help you understand more about what a subject is. We're using this word being verbs a little loosely, but you get the idea. They help to define a subject. But the subject isn't actually doing anything with these kinds of verbs. You also know how to divide the category of verbs into regular or irregular. Or you should. And if you don't, where have you been? I mean, irregular verbs are just simply verbs that don't end in two letters, ed, in the simple past tense. And if they don't do that, then, you gotta learn their past participles and all this stuff. But you should know at least that regular and irregular verbs is a dichotomy. You can only have one or the other. You can't have any verbs that are both regular and irregular. That would defeat the whole purpose. Today, we're looking at transitive and intransitive, which is a similar way to divide the category of verbs into two groups. Unfortunately, this kind of distinction is not very clear sometimes because some verbs can be both. In fact, a lot of verbs can be both. So how do you know if a verb is transitive or intransitive? Well, transitive verbs are kind of like bullies when it comes to sentences. I mean, if you want a really simple sentence, we tell a lot of our young students just two words, that's all you need. Subject, verb. But that doesn't work with transitive verbs because transitive verbs, they need to have something after them. They need specifically a direct object. You cannot have a transitive verb, you cannot have a sentence with a transitive verb that is just two words, subject, verb. Can't happen. A transitive verb has to break through that wall and grab a direct object, something on the other side of the verb itself. Let's look at some examples. Ted brought. That doesn't make any sense. That's why it's wrong. See, you can't have transitive verbs in two-word sentences. It doesn't work. You can't have subject, transitive verb. This kind of idea necessarily leaves you asking what? What is it? What did Ted bring? What? Tell me now! Well, I'll tell you. Ted brought me coffee. That's why I'm so excitable. I mean, that's not really true. I don't even know who Ted is. I had to buy myself coffee. I bought coffee. That's another transitive verb. So you see, transitive verbs need a direct object. I need to know who brought what. You can't just say, I brought. Oh, not without driving your English teacher crazy. So, on the other hand, intransitive verbs don't take direct objects. In fact, they can't take direct objects. You cannot have a direct object with an intransitive verb. The verb itself acts like a wall that you can't get something from the other side. You can't answer the question, Jill goes what? Or Jill goes who? It doesn't make sense. That'll make more sense when I give you the example, but just bear with me. The other thing you need to know about intransitive verbs is that they are always action verbs. Always. So if you remember this, that makes your life a whole lot easier. And also, well, as I said, they can't take a direct object. Let's look at the example. Jill goes to the store. I know, in your writing, this is probably what some of you do some of the time, and it doesn't seem so bad because you're missing a little preposition there. What you have to write is Jill goes to the store. You see, Jill can just go. Someone might be sad to watch Jill go. Jill went. But you can't have Jill went the room. It just doesn't make sense. You can't have a direct object with an intransitive verb. But you can have prepositional phrases. You can always give me more information. There can be grass on the other side of the wall. There can still be stuff there, but it can't be connected to the subject-verb partnership. You can't have direct objects. You can have objects of prepositions, but not objects of what Jill go. It doesn't make sense. Now then there's this last category of verbs that can be all of the above. You can have some verbs that are intransitive sometimes, and they're transitive sometimes, and sometimes the meaning even changes depending on whether or not the verb is transitive or intransitive. So let's look at our last few examples here. First, I run. Well, that's really easy. That's one of those two-word sentences. See, and if it's a two-word sentence, it must be intransitive. And this just means I have a habit. I run. I do this every morning, maybe. But I run. It's something that I do. I run marathons. Well, now I'm giving you a little bit more information. If I say I run, someone might ask me, well, what do you run? How do you run? And I say, well, I run marathons. That's what I run. And I can answer that question still using the same general idea. This idea of me moving quickly with my own two legs. But then I might also say, well, I run this company. I mean, I'm not talking about this company, it's just an example. But here, run means something different. I'm not running around an office building. This idea of run means to control something. So here, the meaning of run actually changes because it is transitive. And that can make this middle sentence a little confusing. This middle sentence could mean two things. It could be ambiguous. It could mean either I run marathons, or I am the person in charge of deciding where the marathon and when the marathon will be decided, in what city, and I control the marathon. But I don't run. So, with that said, let's review.
Intro to transitive and intransitive verbs. What are transitive verbs? Transitive verbs are verbs that need to have a direct object to complete the sentence. What is the direct object of a sentence? The direct object is who or what the subject and verb connects with. What are intransitive verbs? Intransitive verbs are verbs that do not take or need a direct object after it in a sentence. What could intransitive verbs have after the verb? Intransitive verbs could be followed by an object of preposition, but never a direct object. What is an object of preposition? An object of preposition is the noun at the end of a prepositional phrase. Are all action verbs always intransitive? No, some action verbs can be both transitive or intransitive, but all intransitive verbs are action verbs and never being verbs.